Okay, great. Perfect. All right, everyone. Shall we begin? We're just about on time. Perfect. So, all right. Okay. So what we're going to do today is we're going to be learning a letter of Rabbi Ashlag in which he explains the beginning of the exile. Um, in which he explains the beginning of the exile. It's really extraordinary letter. Um, and so what we're going to do, first of all, is I'll start off with my tefillah. Okay, and just to let everybody know, it's a new computer and it's not quite steady yet. A couple of times it's crashed in the middle of a Zoom meeting. So I hope it doesn't do that today. But if it does do that, then what can I tell you is just hang in there and wait for me and I'll rejoin. Okay, that's what's happened in the past. So I hope that I hope you won't need any of that and I hope it will work out. Okay. ריבון העולמים ואדוני אדונים, אב הרחמן והסליחות, מודים אנחנו לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ולאבותינו, בקידה, בהשתחוויה, שקרבתנו לתורתך ולעבודתך עבודת הקודש, ונתת לנו חלק בסודות תורתך הקדושה, מה אנו ומה חיינו, אשר עשית עמנו חסד גדול כזה. על כן אנחנו מפילים תחנוננו לפניך, שתמחול ותסלח לכל חטאותינו ועוונותינו, ועל יהיו עוונותינו מבדילים בינינו לביניך, וכן יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ולאבותינו, שתכונן את לבבינו ליראתך ולבבך, ותקשיב אוזניך לדברינו אלה, ותפתח לבבינו הערל בסודות תורתך, ויהיה לימודנו זה נחת רוח, לפני כיסא כבודך קרח ניחוח, ותציל עלינו, אור מקור נשמתנו בכל בחינתנו, שנוצצו ניצוצות עבודך הקדושים, אשר על ידם גלית דבריך אלה בעולם, וזכותם וזכות אבותם, וזכות תורתם ותמימותם וקדושתם, יעמוד לנו לבל ניכשל בדברים אלו. ובזכותם תראינו במה שאנו לומדים, כמאמרים זמירות ישראל, גל עיני והביטה נפלאות מתורתך, כי אדוני תן חוכמה מפיו דעת ותבונה, יולרות צוני מפי, וגול מבי לפניך, אדוני צורי וגורלי. אמן, כן יהי רצון.
Amen.
Yeah, I really want to dedicate our learning today for the benefit of the people of Iran who are trying to overthrow the cruel dictatorship that is there. And I hope that they do it. And I'm sending them all my love and my prayers and that they keep safe because they're very
Amen.
courageous. Yeah. And I mean, if Hashem helps and we can, it happens, then everybody's going to be so much safer. So I'm just really, I want to dedicate my learning for that.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Right. Fantastic. The people of Iran, I just want to say something in their for their zechut is that during the Second World War, they provided a haven for orphans, for Jewish orphans who were actually roaming the streets of Europe. And they, I think the Jewish Agency managed somehow or other to collect some of them up. And they had to find a way because, of course, Israel was closed with the British blockade and everything. And then the people of Persia opened their hearts to them and gave and brought them in and rescued them and gave them food and lodging, whatever, and then helped them get to Eretz Israel. They became known as the children of Tehran. And the other thing I want to say also in their zechut was when there was terrible pogroms in Iraq against the Jews of Iraq after the war in 19 or during the war in 1948. So again, the Persians turned a blind eye to the Jews escaping over the border to Iran, and from there, the Jewish agency, the Mossad, the underground, was able to get a lot of the Jews out from Tehran to Eretz Israel. And the whole story of how that happened is really amazing. And the Iranians were very kind to the Jewish people in many times. So I'm really thinking of them a lot. Okay, and I want to dedicate our learning to them. All right, so we're going to learn today an amazing article, which I have to say, really, I do find a life changer. Of Rabbi Ashlag. It's a letter that he wrote to his students. It must have been whilst he was away. Oh, I need to share this, don't I? 1 second, do share. Okay, whilst he was away, oh, here we go. It was when he was in Warsaw. So that must have been about 1926 when he had already come on Aliyah to Israel. He'd started the little Beit Midrash with a few students around him. But when he came on Aliyah, he had to leave some of his children behind because they didn't have enough money to bring all the children. And so he went back and he'd left them with relatives, and he went back to Warsaw to pick them up. And at the same time, while he was in Warsaw, he did his best to wake up the Jewish community and tell them it was urgent. They had to leave Europe and come to Eretz Israel. So it was whilst he was away there that he wrote this letter. Okay, Lichvod. Okay, so we're going to read it together with Rabbi Gottlieb's commentary, because what does Rabbi Gottlieb do is he takes, which is true, it's Rabbi Ashlag's system, is to take the historical setting of the exile in Egypt and the redemption as being happening in the present in us. Okay, so everything that happens, the way that Rabbi Ashlag sees the Torah is that every single person is a world in himself. This comes from the Zohar. And so therefore, every single element which appears in the Torah, in the story, which is, for example, Moses, Pharaoh, Egypt, the slavery, the redemption, all these aspects are aspects that happen within ourselves. Okay? So we can actually when we read the stories of the Torah, we actually can see the different elements, how they apply to us as well. Now, Rabbi Gottlieb is a tremendous student of Rabbi Ashlag and a tremendous teacher, and so his commentary brings it into the present. So we're going to learn the letter together with his commentary, okay, as far as we can go. All right. So Rabbi Ashlag writes like this. Rabbi Ashlag's writing is in bold and Rabbi Gottlieb is in ordinary. Lichvod b'nei yeshiva ditu rabbanim Hashem aleim yichyu. So to my students, basically. I'm very sorry about some of the weak limbs. Now, what is he talking about? Some of the companions, whilst he was away, found that their connection with the group wasn't that strong. Shesibot chitzoniot gavu aleihem, and different circumstances came about and overcame their desire milhistapech imachem, to join together with you. And Rabbi Ashlag's work got a lot of criticism, a lot of opposition at the time, also from the wives. It wasn't very easy to be a pioneer, and sometimes people didn't manage it. Yiten Hashem shechasku v'yuchulu litchaber manu. May God give them the strength, and they'll be able to rejoin us. V'yeh Hashem imahem, and may God be with them. ואני מבין שאינכם עוסקים על כל כך בייחודים דמוך וליבה. And I understand that you, that's he's talking to the students, aren't actually practicing so much the unity, the union of the tikkun of the mind. What's the tikkun of the mind? The mind wants to know everything. It wants to base everything on experience, on knowledge. Okay, that's the faculty of the mind. And what's the tikkun of the mind? The correction of that desire is to go in faith. Okay, so the tikkun of the mind is faith. And the heart, okay, the heart is the seat of the center of our desires to receive pleasure and joy. We want to receive pleasure and joy, sensual pleasure and joy, to feel pleasure and joy. And the tikkun of that is, instead of what can I receive, it's what can I give. Okay? Now, what he's saying here is that these two parts of ourselves, our mind and our heart, need to work in tandem. They need to work in an integrated way within ourselves. So we need to be working with faith, which overcomes our will to receive everything in rationality and put it on, a firm basis of experience. Okay? No, we have to step out in faith. And the heart, instead of what can I receive for my own comfort, for my own whatever, okay, what's the tikkun of that? The tikkun of that is, how can I be giving? So what is he saying? He's saying to the students, I understand that you're not practicing so much how to unite the faculty of the mind and the faculty of the heart, faith and giving, kechefzi, as I would like. Im kol zeh, nevertheless, asu kafi kochachem, do the best you can, u'tshuat Hashem kecheref ayin, and the salvation of God comes like a twinkling of the eye. Va'ikar omed hayom lifnechem u'achdut hachaverim. But the most important element which stands today before you is the union of the unity among the companions. Now, why was this very important? Because they actually were very different when you read their biographies. And I put some of them, those biographies, in the book Master of the Ladder, the biography of Rabbi Ashlag and his students. If you want to read that book, I mean, the students were phenomenal. And they really were very different. And each one of them had a different way of serving God. And by joining together in unity, they would get the union of mind and heart. And make the most effort in this you possibly can, because that alone makes up for all other lacks. Okay? Really, really important message for us in Eretz Yisrael today. Ita, it's written in the Talmud, Talmid Shigala Megalin Babo Imo. A Talmud who is being exiled, his Rav is exiled with him. What are they talking about? It's talking about the situation where, God forbid, somebody has committed manslaughter. Okay, and it turns out that this somebody is a Talmid Chacham, a student of a Rav. And I don't know, he was out, the classic one is if you're out in the forest and you're chopping down a tree or something, and the axe head flies off the handle and hits somebody, and God forbid kills him. Okay, so then a person had to escape the vengeance of the relatives or whatever, and they needed to get to a city of refuge, and they had to be in exile in this city of refuge until the Kohen Gadol died, and new Kohen Gadol was instituted. Okay, now there's this odd saying in the Talmud there, which says that when a student was exiled, his rabbi was exiled with him. Why are they saying this? Perush, explanation. The sages of the Talmud were having a difficult issue with the whole problem. How is it possible שישלטו קטרוגים בתורה ועבודה של התלמיד, that the negative influences, the accusations, the judgments, whatever, would be so strong against the pupil who's after all learning Torah, doing the mitzvot, עד כדי גירושם להסתפך בנחלת השם, to the extent that something happens to him, that he's forced to be driven out from the companionship of the Talmidim, that he's no longer being able to be amongst the Talmidim. How did this accident happen? וזאת אחר שהוא דבוק ברב אמיתי, and this is after he was connected with a true sage. And Rabbi Gottlieb, says, okay, אפשר לפרש רב כפשוטו. You can explain this as a sage. אפשר לפרש שרב הוא השם יתברך. But one can also say that after he was connected with Hashem Yitbarach, with God, begin de'ihu rav v'shalit, that God himself is abundant in loving kindness and the cause of all. Okay, so you've got the situation that you've got a student and he's connected with his Rav, or he's connected with God, and something happens to him which is so drastic that he commits this sin of manslaughter. Okay, he didn't intend it, but this is what happened and now he's got to be in exile. So they're asking the question, how can such a thing happen? And on this they explained, because when the student went down in his spiritual level, it actually seemed to him that his rabbi also had gone down in his spiritual level. In other words, he's now seeing the rabbi, he's now seeing his sage or God, whichever one you want to look at it, through his own lower lens, if you like. All right, his lens is now not so clear, it's got thicker, dusty or something. Okay, and now he's perceiving his rabbi from that same lowly lens. Okay? V'kevan sheken, and since this is the case, hari bemet ken, then actually comes to be that way. Like the way he's seeing his rabbi is the way he's now actually relating to him. Klomar shelo yochal la'anot mirabo. He's no longer able to get pleasure from his rabbi, meaning he's no longer able to learn Torah from him. Ela kupum mad masha'er b'libo, only according to the measure of what he estimates his rabbi to be in his heart. V'im came, and since he himself has gone down in the spiritual level, ein lo ela rav shaful v'yarud. His rabbi seems to him also to be lowly and gone down in his estimation. Because in this, the measure that he's now judging his rabbi, therefore his rabbi is exiled with him. And Rav Gottlieb says, since he's looking at his Rav, or we're looking at God, all right, from a lowly place, we're not considering God as important in our lives, all right? And I think nowadays, it's with the rise of technology just going completely mad, it's unfortunately easy to forget God. So since he's looking at his rabbi from such a lowly place, that becomes the way he sees his rabbi, shehi begalut, and that is exile, all right? And that is also our exile from God. When we are not valuing the light of God in our lives as the source of all and the abundance of love, okay, and that it's first in our lives, then that's actually exile. Rav Gottlieb says, Meramez Khan, Rav Ashlag is hinting here, the highest light is in the state of complete rest. What does that mean? Ein sham shinoi. It doesn't change at all. All its one desire is to give goodness to the created beings maximally. That's all it wants. Ela kol hashinuyim by mitzvot hakelim. But all the changes are coming from the vessels, from us. We change, and so we see the light of God differently. And if the vessel is in a lowly state, then he feels that the world around him is also lowly. So now it comes to the issue of the galut. תחילת גלות מצרים והשעבוד מתחיל מהכתוב, ויקום מלך חדש על מצרים אשר לא ידע את יוסף. The beginning of the exile of Egypt and the servitude begins from the scripture, and a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. Now, the way Rav Ashlag explains this is not that there was a different Pharaoh, okay, or the old Pharaoh who pretended he didn't know Joseph. He relates it all to within ourselves, or to within the children of Israel, okay? Perush, explanation. שנתגלתה שליטה חדשה של רצון לקבל במוחם של כל אחד ואחד, שליטה חדשה מקרוב, כי נפלו ממדרגתם הקדומה. There became apparent now a new governance, okay, of the will to receive, like instead of the will to give, which is the will of faith, but the will to receive for oneself in the mind of each and every one. A new governance within themselves, okay? So they're now not listening to Melech Malchei Melachim, the Supreme King of Kings. Now they're listening to Melech Kasil V'Zaken, the old or foolish king, the will to receive oneself alone. Ki naflu mimadregatam hakduma, They fell down from their previous spiritual stage. וכנ"ל שהתלמיד שגלה מגלים מבו עמו. In exactly the same way, they had a student previously, okay, who was exiled, and his rabbis are exiled with him. In other words, that the way they're now, because they're losing, the children of Israel are losing, or we lose our relationship, true relationship with God through the soul, through faith, through giving, and we've turned into an aspect of the will to see for ourselves alone. What's happening now? That we become into exile, because that's what the meaning of exile is. Exile is separation from the Creator. וממילא לא ידעו את יוסף. And as a consequence of the turning into that will to receive oneself alone, as a consequence, they're no longer connected with Yosef. Remember, taht in the language of Kabbalah is not intellectual knowledge, it's connection, okay? So they're no longer connected with Joseph. כלומר, שלא השיגו אותו, אלא כפי מה ששיערו בליבם. That is, they didn't no longer attain Joseph, the tzaddik, the middle line, okay? Except the way that they're now seeing him in their hearts. דהיינו בצורה שפלה ונמוכה, in a lowly way. Because they're seeing him the way they're seeing themselves. Do you see what I'm saying? And then we do the same thing. We see Torah mitzvot from the lens of how we're seeing ourselves. And when we're in the, framework of the world to receive for ourselves alone, then we see God, we see Torah mitzvot in the same way. ולכן צירו בליבם תמונת יוסף כמוהם עצמם. They imagined in their mind, or in their heart, the picture of Joseph as they were themselves. ומכיוון שכן לא ידעו את יוסף. And since they've gone into the whole aspect of the will to receive oneself alone, which is the slavery of Egypt, okay? Mitzrayim, okay, is the Meitzarim, is that narrow aspect, that there's no bounty there, it's the will to receive oneself alone. And since they didn't have any connection any longer with Joseph, התחיל השעבוד, the slavery started. שאם לא כן, because if that had not been the case, that they've lost this connection with Joseph, ודאי היה צדיק מגן עליהם, then for sure their connection with the tzaddik would have saved them, would have protected them. ולא הייתה מצויות להם כלל בחינת גלות ושעבוד, and they would not have been even possible to imagine at all the aspect of exile and slavery. ואם יכולים ללך באמונה, and if they were able to walk in faith, ולומר, שעיניים להם ולא יראו, like the psalmist says, they have eyes but they do not see. היינו, הגם שרואים שפלות יוסף, even though, for example, they could see some, I don't know, defect or lowliness in Joseph, whatever, מכל מקום, אם תולים את אשמם בעצמם, but if they would put the blame on themselves, okay, אבל מאמינים שיוסף מצד עצמו מורומם ונשגב, but would still maintain their belief that Joseph, as he is in himself, is exalted and high, אז עדיין יכולים לקבל הרע מיוסף. They could still have received light from Joseph. אבל באם מתאמצים, even if they were to try, ואינם יכולים לעשות זאת, but they weren't able to do that, to believe that Joseph is a tzaddik, אזי מוכרחים ליפול לגלות ושעבוד, and they would be bound to fall to exile and slavery. וגם זהו לצורך גילוי הכלים לקבלה שלהם. And this was, in fact, part of God's plan. And it's also part of God's plan for us sometimes, because we need to discover what our vessels of receiving really are. Dahainu giloi hakarat. We need to reveal, we need to have recognition of the evil within us. Because only by recognizing the evil can we look for and yearn for the good. Okay? And this is from a phrase, I think it's in Kohelet. Yitaron ha'or sheba me'achoshech. That the light shines brighter when it comes from the dark. And Rabbi Ashlag writes in a beautiful essay on exile and redemption that in fact there can be no redemption unless there is prior exile, because every coming into being of connection with God has to be preceded by the lack of connection with God, because only by recognizing the lack can we pray to God for redemption. Okay, any questions before we go on? All right, very good. All right, so now he's going to talk about what the slavery actually consisted of. ומפורש שיבודם בחומר ובלבנים. It's explicit that their servitude was with chomer. Chomer is usually translated as the mortar, and bilvenim is usually translated as the bricks. Okay, Rabbi Ashlag is going to look at these words in a very different way. All right, chomer is sometimes translated as the will to receive, but here he says chomer, usod avon hachamor, is like the most serious sin, shedanin bezel hamachshava, which is the one sin which we're judged for in our thought, dahainu avodah zarah, which is worshipping other gods. Shadam oved levatzon kabel, that a person works, and in this case, what's his other god? Himself, his own ego, his own will to receive for himself alone. Bimkom la'avod laborei, instead of serving the Creator. Now, normally, for all the other sins, basically, if you get a thought of a sin, but you don't actually do it, it doesn't count. Okay? You had a nisayon, you had a trial of getting this thought of a sin in your mind, okay? And but if you don't actually act on it, nothing happened. That's not the case with avodah zarah, idol worship, and basically worshipping anything other than God. All right, and we can see we worship, we serve our will to receive for ourselves alone instead of serving the Creator. And that would be called the chomer. So this slavery, he says, is through that most serious sin of idol worship. Bilvenim, he looks at the word lavan, which is hidden in there. Bilvenim means bricks, but here he's looking at it from the aspect of white, bleaching, coming white. Husota tshuva, and that's the inner meaning of repentance. So what would happen? They would fall down, okay, and then they would do repentance. Then they would do tshuva. So they would merit to mercy from God. And they attained for the moment the highest light. And how did they get that? Because of their faith in the Holy Fathers. v'nitlabnu me'avonotehem, and they were whitened from their sins. Ela shelo hayu litmidut, but they couldn't keep it up. Okay, והיו מתגלגלים ובאים מלחמה זה בכל עבודה בשדה. So they would fall down into their will to receive themselves alone, which they were serving. Then they would realize what would happen, do tshuva, okay, but they couldn't maintain it, and they'd fall down all over again. And because of this, they kept going round and round and round, okay, and ultimately they came into all the servitude in the field. And this then began to affect how they were doing all the other mitzvot. Which was out not only avodah zarah, but it began to affect also all their other mitzvot. K'moshe amru, as the sages said, zichronam livracha, beinoniyim ze v'ze shoftam. You know the story of the righteous on Rosh Hashanah, the Beinoni, the one who's still battling, he's not clear, he's in the middle, going one way one moment, one way the next moment, okay? And then you've got the Rishaim, which are also clear who they are. Now, this is not different people, it's different aspects of ourselves, okay? We've all got aspects, Baruch Hashem, that are already tzaddikim, okay? And we don't actually need to work with those very much because they're not the ones that are problematic, okay? We've also got aspects of ourselves which are very immature, we're very unaware of them, very unconscious of them, and they're the Rishaim. They're our basic wills to receive ourselves alone, which we haven't even looked at, okay? And the bits where we struggle is called the Beinonim. And altogether, it's called a tzibor, tzaddik, Beinoni, v'rasha. And each one of us has within ourselves a collection, okay, of the tzaddik, the Beinoni, and the rasha within ourselves. So what's the aspect of the Beinoni? Ze v'ze shoftan. We go one side one time, one side another. One time we're listening to our will to receive for ourselves alone, and then we feel the suffering from that. And so we do tshuva, okay, and we stick with our will to give, and then we forget again, and we fall back down again. So this whole situation of not being able to maintain our work in Torah mitzvot, but going round and round in circles like this is the klipa of Pharaoh, okay? So what's he telling us here? Pharaoh is a very tricky customer, all right? Because he allows us to receive some light, but then we fall down again. And he goes on to say, Pharaoh is otiyot pera. The word Pharaoh is made up from the letters pera. Per is the malchut, all right? And the malchut acting in a way which is bad. Perush, explanation. The bechinat malchut shebamochin nikret peh. The malchut in the aspect of the mind, okay, is called the mouth. All right, the sfirot can map onto the face as well, and it's another way of looking at them. So, for example, the eyes would be chokhmah, the ears would be bina, the nose is tiferet, and the mouth is malchut. Okay. Now, when the malchut is functioning properly, shesodohu b'chinat hachra'a v'askama shelo yachel devaro, what he says is what he does. Okay, what a person says is what he carries out. That means he doesn't make his word secular. Kol hayotzei mipiv yaseh. Everything that he promises to do, he goes and does. Okay? Now let's look at it in this situation. If he decides to throw away all his idol worship, and we said that the idol worship could be worshipping oneself, worshipping one's ego, okay, working for one's ego entirely without any thought for God. All right. But if we decide, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. I feel how horrible it is. I feel the separation. I feel ichsa afterwards. I really don't want to do this anymore. Okay, I've learnt my lesson. So now he makes that decision. He's going to walk after God. And he actually does it in practice. And he sticks to what he decides. That's called the Malchut of Kedusha, okay? That his Malchut is whatever his Malchut's decided, that's what he's going to do. And that's the usual Malchut, that's the proper Malchut. But Galut Mitzrayim, in the exile of Egypt, Pharaoh. What was happening? The governance was not from the proper Malchut, it was given to the bad Malchut. Okay? In other words, it wasn't at all that what came forth from his mouth he's going to do. But what comes out from his mouth is one reality. And what actually happens in practice, what he actually manages to do is a totally different reality. And they would go back to their wrongdoing. So I don't know about you guys, but I can certainly recognize this within myself. Okay? I can really see how the metaphor of the exile of Egypt and the Pharaoh that he's describing is certainly something I can recognize within myself. All right? So we can see how what Rabbi Ashlag's way of looking at the Torah as the example, if you like, of processes happening within ourselves, you can really see how this is true. And so therefore, even though the children of Israel merited to some illumination from the higher 9 Sfirot, okay, when the 9 Sfirot, but when they decided with a complete decision that they were going to lachzor b'tshuva, that they were going to do tshuva, they were not going to follow their wills to receive for themselves alone any longer. But they couldn't get it to happen in reality. They couldn't get it they could not get it to work in practice. In other words, there was this tremendous block between the mind and the heart. There was a tremendous block between the thought and the action, between the mind and the body. Do you remember this is what Rav Ashlag told the students to practice? Okay? And the Galut of Egypt is, there's a block at the head of the neck, at the neck area. Okay, so what we think, all right, is not following through. So when what would actually happen was in their mind, they would choose God. In practice, they would be choosing their will to receive. So this Pharaoh, this evil Malchut, if you like, is the opposite of the Malchut of Kedusha. What is the Malchut? The governance of ourselves. Okay? So instead of governing ourselves in holiness, we're being governed by this horrible klipa, this desire to receive for ourselves alone. And the word of Pharaoh, if you look at the letters, Pei, Hey, Reish, Ayin, that's the Pharaoh. What have you got here? Pei, Reish, Hey, Ayin. That's the neck. Okay, so Pharaoh is the neck. Okay, and what was he doing? He stops the light going down from the mind to the body. And would suck out and feed off all the bounty, the light, which had begun to come down for the sake of Israel. So what does this mean in practice? That all the bounty which comes, okay, with the light of God which is coming, and it only comes when we're in affinity of form with the Creator through faith or through giving, is now being swiped by the vessels of receiving. ממילא אין הערת התשע ראשונות יכולים להביאם להפסיק את העבודה זרה שלהם. And the light of the 9 sfirot isn't sufficient to help them stop their idol worship. Okay? Why not? Because the 9 sfirot are not strong sfirot. The strongest one, the main vessel of all the sfirot is the malchut. Okay? וזה סוד שלא היה שום עבד יכול לברוח ממצרים. This is the inner meaning of what Rashi says, that no slave could ever escape from Egypt. Okay? In other words, once we are in the grip of this Pharaoh, we can't get out of there very easily. We can't just escape it. All right? כי Pharaoh עשה כישוף גדול לפתחי מצרים, because Pharaoh did a tremendous witchcraft on the doorways of Egypt. כמו שאמרו חז"ל, as the sages said. So Rabbi Gottlieb explains this. What does this mean? כישוף הוא שליטת הרצון לקבל. Witchcraft is the governance of the will to receive for ourselves alone. ברצונו להגיד שהייתה שליטה כל כך חזקה, that this will to receive was holding on to them and holds on to us as well, such a strong way, עד ששום אדם לא היה יכול לברוח מן השליטה, that nobody could actually get out of this governance. משמש מדבר שאדם רוצה לברוח מן השליטה הזאת. So what actually happens, that a person wants to escape from this governance, ועושה מאמצים בכל כוחותיו, and he does maximum efforts to get out of this governance of the world to receive for himself alone. אבל שאין שום אפשרות בפועל לברוח, but he can't actually do it in practice. וכישוף זה היה על פתחי מצרים, and this witchcraft, this will to receive for itself alone, was governing the will to do tshuva. It was stopping the will to do tshuva. And why is it called a petach, the will to do tshuva? A doorway, pitchuli petach, because God says, open to me just a little opening, like the point of a needle, and I will open to you big fairways, big carriages can go by. So how are we going to get out? ובזה מובן הפירוש, הפסוק. And now we can understand the pasuk. ואני ידעתי כי לא ייתן אתכם מלך מצרים ללך ולא ביד חזקה. That God says to Moses, and I know that that king of Egypt is not going to let you go, and not without a strong hand. פירוש, שהשם נברך הודיע על ידי משה עבדו, that God told the children of Israel through the agency of Moses, his servant. And if we're talking about now, who's the Moses within us? It's the aspect of faith within us. That no strong hand or powers in the world of any use at all against this evil klipa, because it does not give in, it does not surrender, except before God in his glory himself. I am not a messenger. In other words, God himself has to take us out of this klipa. And the person to pray to is God. We can only ask God to help us. That's the only thing that will work. I didn't mean the word person, I apologize. Okay? The only force, the only whatever you call it, God, okay, we can pray to is God can take us out. Only God. And this is the inner meaning of, and I stretched forth my hand and I hit the Egyptians. And I gave the grace of this people in the eyes of the Egyptians. Until they themselves will send the Jewish person away. Okay. How does this function? The faith needs to be in two aspects. Number one, and this we generally find out of experience, that a person cannot help himself with his own strength. כי בכל פעם שאדם נכשל, מציע לו הגוף שיש עוד תחבולה שעוד לא ניסה ותולה בתחבולה ההיא. And what actually happens in practice is that each time we fall down, the body, the will to see for oneself alone says, oh, we could try something else. There's another tactic you can try that you haven't tried yet, and the person then hangs his hopes on that particular tactic. But שהקדוש ברוך הוא כן יוכל לעזור. And we need to know that the Holy Blessed One can help. וכן רוצה לעזור, and wants to help. הגם שבעיני השכל נראה לו כך. Even though in the eyes of our rational mind, it doesn't look like that. ועניין עזרה על ידי שליח, and the issue of help through a shaliach, through an agent, שנדמה לאדם שעדיין יש תחבולה מסוימת שיכולה להצילו, is that it seems to a person that there's still some sort of tactic that could help him, that could save him from this awful klipa. אבל כשמגיע למסקנה שאין עוד שום תחבולה, but when he reaches the conclusion that there really isn't any other tactic, נמצא שאין שום שליח, there is no other agent, מלבד השם נתברך בעצמו, only God himself שיכול להצילו, that can save him. And I think, it's not written here in this particular letter, but I think that, the whole process of geula, of redemption, begins ב"וינחו בני ישראל מן העבודה", when the children of Israel sighed from the work, ויזעקו, and they cried out to God, ותעל שבתם אל אלוהים, and their cry for help went up to God. So once they had tried everything, or they'd realized that they could only ask for help from God, that's when the geula started to happen. Okay? But sometimes you have to go through a lot of trial and error and falling downs and whatever until one comes to that conclusion. Rav Gottlieb adds, ולפעמים נדמה לאדם שכן מקבל עזרה משליח, Sometimes it seems to a person that he does get help from a shaliach, an agent, like a friend or a rabbi or somebody, okay? But we have to say, like we say in Brit Shemayt, you say that in Sephardi shuls when they open the ark, okay? Lo al enosho chitzna, I'm not trusting in any human agency. Velo al ba Elohim semichna, and I'm not trusting on any ben Elohim, or in other words, a Rav or something. Ele belohad d'shmayra, only on God Himself. Okay, all right. And he goes on to say that we have to understand that, yes, we need our friends, we need our rabbis, we need all, the agents of God, but they are the garments. And they're the garments which are clothing the light of God. And the true help is coming from Ein od milvado, that there is no other power than God Himself. That we need to trust only in God and not in the garments. And yes, we need our friends, we need our companions on the way, we need our rabbis, we need the Torah, we need the Torah and God is the same actually, but we need the but it's God Himself who gets us out. Okay, Vimlo az yesyo b'derech lo yeh. If it doesn't work with one garment, then God will help us through another garment. Now then, how are we doing for? Oh dear, I've only got another 3 minutes. All right, let's do a little bit more. ועתה בואו נבוא לפרש לכם בעזרת השם יתברך בשורת הגאולה ושליחת משה. Now we'll start this at least and we'll see how we get on. We won't have too much time. So now we've come to explain to you Bezrat Hashem, the announcement of the redemption and the shlichut of Moses. Katuv, Vayan Moshe v'yomer, and Moses answered and he said, Ve'en lo ya'aminu li. They're not going to believe me. Ki yomu lo nireh elech Hashem. They're going to say, how do we know God appeared to you? Perush, what's the problem here? The kevan shepod peh tikdushaya b'galut, since the Malchut was in exile, okay, in other words, all their ability to have faith, all their ability to give, okay, was in exile. B'sod ki kaved peh v'kaved lashon anochi. I won't be able to get my message across. All right, why not? Because they're not going to believe me. They don't have the capacity of faith because they're in slavery to this klipa of Pharaoh, to this whole will to receive that we call Egypt. So how are they going to have the capacity to believe the message? They don't have the capacity to believe me. Even if I was to connect Israel with me, and I'll bring down to them some sort of light or something, the klipa of Pharaoh is just sucking it out and grabbing it from them. Okay? So how am I going to get past this? Even if they are together with me, they're not going to be able to listen to what I'm saying, to my voice. Since they're all still under the governance of the klipa of Pharaoh, and the Malchut is in exile. Nevertheless, even though that was true, if they were able to believe in Ve'ya Mahaimana, is the name of Moshe Rabbeinu in the Zohar, the faithful shepherd, the shepherd of faith, okay, then the children of Israel would be able to listen to the voice of Moses. Why? Because he's actually above the Malchut. Moshe Rabbeinu comes from the aspect of Tiferet, okay, which is higher than the Malchut. And if they were to get strong in their faith from that, like just believing in Moses as the aspect of faith, that Moses is the one who's going to teach them faith, then for sure they would be saved from the klipa of Pharaoh, through the strength of faith. Because the klipa of Pharaoh is not able to govern in the consciousness of faith. Where does Pharaoh have his governance? In the consciousness of rationality. Okay, what's Pharaoh? Pharaoh says the voice within who says, "Who is God that I should listen to his voice?" Because he recognizes God in nature. Okay, Elohim, mi Hashem sheshma b'kolo, but he doesn't understand God. He doesn't recognize God as faith. That's completely beyond him. Okay, he has no idea what that's about. Okay, so Pharaoh can see heavenly powers in nature, okay, which is knowledge, which is experience, but he has no idea whatsoever in faith. And this is why Moses, the faithful shepherd, complained to God. But they'll say, God didn't appear to you. In the same way that happened with Joseph, okay, because they're in a lowly state, and they'll see Moses in a lowly way as well. In the same thing that happened, that a new king arose over Egypt who didn't know Joseph. Because they themselves are in a lowly state, they won't be able to see Moses as the faithful shepherd. Because they've gone down into the materialism of idol worship, they would also blaspheme deny the greatness of Moses, the faithful shepherd, the greatness of faith. So how can Moses redeem them from when they're stuck in this awful, evil, strong klipa like this? And that's why God gave him 3 signs. That God would show them to the children of Israel. And he taught him to organize these signs in front of the children of Israel, one after the other. And God promised him that he would help him from heaven, that he would manage to show them to them. And once the children of Israel have taken on these signs, like they've received them from him, then they'll be able to listen to what Moses is saying. And then he will be able to redeem them from this bitter exile. So we're going to look at, we're a bit running over time, but never mind. We're going to look at just one of them, all right? The very first one, all right? We'll just do one, because then we get the idea. And now I'll explain to you the inner meaning of the 3 signs. Ot harishon, the first sign. The transformation of the staff into a snake and the snake into a staff. Ot bet, the second sign. When he took his hand out, not from his bosom, then he found it was leprous with like snow. Botzot yado mechiko, and when he took it out from his bosom in a shaval b'bsoro, it came back just like his flesh. And the third sign is when you poured out the water from the Nile onto the ground, it turned into blood. Okay, so we'll just look at one of them. So I'm going to explain to you now how he showed them to Israel. Now, in the hand of the Redeemer was a staff. What's the staff? The staff is the aspect of faith. Mata b'chashivut. It's a play on words. Faith is not usually valued very much by the human being. We prefer knowledge and we prefer experience. We don't like faith very much. We tend to consider it lowly. So it's called lowly in importance. Mata b'chashivut. So the staff is the Vaya Mehemana, is the faithful shepherd, who shepherds Israel and brings them along, leads them along after him with faith. And it's with this power of faith, that's his staff, to incline the heart of Israel to their Father in heaven. So l'hatot is like with a staff. Okay? V'mishlichehu outza. Okay? And if you cast it to the ground, perush, meaning, shebnei Yisrael lokhim et matehu, if the children of Israel were to take their faith, okay, which is the staff, l'shamesh mo kiutzonam, and just use it the way they want, and it's play on words again. Outsa to the ground is like leratzon, is their desire. Okay, in other words, they're using their faith to fill up their will to receive. Vila nahash, it's going to turn into a snake. Hanush nasa klipa, becomes a klipa. Shenireh lahem chatam kamo bal chai, and now their sin appears to them like a living thingamajig, like a snake. Now, before they met Moses and before he brought them to this issue of trying to go in faith, then their sin was much more in the aspect of the domain, the inanimate, like dealing with tavot gashmiot, animal appetites, physical appetites. But now he's talking to them about faith in God. Okay, that's actually a bigger will to receive, that they want to receive God also with their will to receive. That's a much bigger desire, okay, will to receive, and becomes an actual snake. They want the light of God and the aspect of an animal, in a sense, which is a higher level or a deeper level of the will to receive. Ad vayonos Moshe mipanav. In other words, and Moses fled from it, meaning that they can't see Moses as being able to handle this. So, but when Moses, the aspect of faith, comes to deliver them from the bite of this snake, he grabs the snake by its tail and not by its head. In other words, he grabs the snake through the aspect of faith, all right? Not through the aspect of desire, of knowledge. For a false redeemer, if he were to come to save Israel, grabs the snake by its head, to smash the head of the snake. That's the way that all snake catchers work. Okay? That is, if you come to nullify this klipa, okay, by using one's knowledge or one's rationality, okay, it's not going to work. Goel Amiti, the true Redeemer, Ochez oto davka biznavo, grabs it by its tail, okay? And what that means is that he's got to work also through faith. And there's a whole piece in the Zohar on this, which we don't have time for today, maybe another time, okay? But in other words, in order to bring them to faith, you have to work through faith. All right? And when they see that, karev libam hotatam lekapsuchut, then it becomes an aspect of faith in his hand. He shows them that the way to deal with the wills to receive oneself alone is actually through faith. The faith that God helps us, the faith that God takes us out, the faith that God can rescue us, the faith that things are not the way that, totally impossible, the faith in redemption, the faith in the way of faith. Okay, then the snake becomes the staff. Okay, and it becomes a way of actually transforming our wills to receive for ourselves alone as the staff through which we can move forwards. Okay, שאז פועל באמת בקרב ליבם לתותם לקו זכות. So by teaching them to even take the fact that they're on the floor and they're in exile and they are working with their will to receive for themselves alone, but to take that snake and say, no, 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 we're not going to work with our wills to receive. We're going to go even here in faith. Then that snake becomes a staff to incline their hearts to the side of positive, the side of merit, the side of giving. And when the children of Israel receive this light, which is the sign of the way of serving God, then God gives Moses the permission and the ability to show them the second sign, which is the sign of how to serve God with love. And I think this is perfect place to end for today. It's a beautiful letter. It's a long letter, but I think that we did what we could. And so I think that's probably enough for now. Okay.
Thank you, Judith.
You're very, very welcome. I didn't ask, was there any questions or anything? I mean, I was sort of just keeping going. Does anybody want to ask anything at this point before we go, or comment or say anything or whatever?
Well, it's just beautiful. Very
that was spectacular.
Yes.
Thank
you so much. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom. Fantastic.
Okay. Thank you. That was spectacular. Thank you so much. Really gorgeous.
Baruch Hashem, Toda Rabba. Thank you, everybody. It was Rabbi Ashlag, so there we go.
Thank you. But Shabbat Shalom. But will you continue this next time so we can go on with these?
Well, next time we're going to have this. I mean, this is the problem with Parshat Shavua. I mean, there used to be a time when they read the whole of the Torah once every 3 years, and I mean, it took them 3 years to complete a cycle, and I can absolutely understand why, because there's never enough time to do the whole of the parasha. But I have actually written, no, I don't know if I translated the whole thing. I'm not sure. I don't think I've got a translation of the second bit. I've got a translation of the first part of the letter, and I can pop that on the WhatsApp if you like, and send that to you guys.
Thank you.
Okay.
That would be amazing. Is it possible to also receive the Hebrew? It's Michelle.
Yeah. I can pop the Hebrew. I scanned the Hebrew from the book called Pri Chacham Igarot from Rabbi Ashlag, and it's the edition with Rabbi Gottlieb's commentary. So I scanned it, and I'll pop that in the WhatsApp as well. Yeah, no problem.
Oh, Wow, amazing.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
This was incredible.
Thank you, Deborah.
Wonderful.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Shabbat
Bless you,
shalom.
my love. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Okay, great. All right, bye then.
It's very good.
All right. There you go. Knowledge. Very nice. Okay. All right, everyone. Okay, so